What if I told you there is a single verse hidden in the Quran for centuries that carries the power to break the chains of fear that have been suffocating your heart? Imagine standing in the silence of the night, your chest tight, your mind racing with thoughts of the future, the unknown, the losses you fear might come. You smile on the outside, but inside you are crumbling, drowning in an ocean of anxiety that nobody else can see. You whisper prayers, wondering if Allah truly hears you. You try to breathe, but the fear only grows stronger. And then, suddenly, you hear words so powerful, so timeless, that they pierce the darkness and whisper to your soul, "This verse will free you from fear." Many people live their entire lives enslaved to what they cannot control. Fear of tomorrow, fear of loneliness, fear of death itself. They wake up every day carrying invisible chains, thinking they are alone in their suffering. But what if that suffering was never a sign of weakness? What if your fear is actually a doorway, an opening that Allah placed in your life not to break you, but to guide you? Few people know this truth because it has been hidden beneath layers of noise and distraction. And yet, in the Qur'an, Allah revealed a secret that most overlook, a verse so profound that once it enters your heart, it changes everything. This is not a motivational cliché. This is not empty reassurance. This is a divine promise. And once you hear it, once you allow it to reach into the deepest places of your soul, you will never look at fear the same way again. Picture yourself standing before the sea of your problems, waves towering high, enemies closing in behind you. You are trembling, hopeless. Then you hear a voice, steady and unshaken. "Do not be afraid, indeed, my Lord is with me." Can you feel how those words cut through despair? That is what you are about to experience in this video. Stay with me, because you are not here by accident. You were guided here. Out of billions of people on this earth, Allah brought you to this moment. Perhaps this is the answer to the prayer you whispered when no one was listening. Perhaps this is the night He chose to lift the fear from your chest. Breathe deeply, say Bismillah, and prepare yourself. Because in a few moments, I will reveal to you the verse that will free you from fear. And once you hear it, nothing inside you will ever be the same. Before I share with you the verse that will free you from fear, I want you to pause for a moment, breathe deeply, whisper Bismillah, and recognize that you are not watching this video by coincidence. Allah guided you here. Perhaps you were scrolling restlessly, searching for something to ease your heart, and this message appeared. That is not an accident. It is a sign that Allah has chosen this very moment to speak to your soul. And I want you to do something powerful. If you feel this message is already touching your heart, I invite you to declare your faith openly in the comments. Write, "I trust in Allah, no matter my fears." Let this be your public stand, your declaration that you refuse to be enslaved by fear any longer. Some will stay silent, some will doubt, but those who truly long for Allah's mercy will not be ashamed to write it. This is not just a comment, it is an act of faith, a testimony that may inspire another believer who is silently suffering. If your heart is beating faster as you listen, if you feel the weight lifting even slightly, then like this video, not as a simple click, but as a form of sadaqah jariyah. By doing so, you allow this reminder from the Quran to reach other hearts that are desperate for healing, just like yours. And when they find relief because you helped spread this message, you will share in the reward. And do not walk this path alone. Join this community by subscribing, because here your soul will always find what it seeks. Reminders that anchor your heart, stories from the Quran that renew your hope, and guidance that reminds you you are never alone. Stay with me until the end, because Allah revealed something about your fear that most people overlook. Something so profound that once you hear it, you will understand why He guided you here tonight. Do not turn away before you hear it. Prepare yourself. Perhaps Allah is about to answer the very prayer you whispered in tears. The night was dark, and the desert winds carried a silence that was almost unbearable. Imagine standing there, trapped between the roaring waves of the sea and the dust clouds rising from the army that was chasing you. Fear presses down on your chest, your children cry, your family trembles, and every rational part of your mind screams that there is no way out. That is exactly where Musa stood, with his people behind him, watching as Pharaoh's army closed in, armed and merciless. They could hear the hooves of the horses, the clashing of weapons, and the cries of the soldiers thirsting for revenge. Panic began to spread among them, their voices rising in despair. We are surely overtaken. They were consumed by the terror of the unknown future. They saw no path forward, no escape, no hope. And then Musa, in the calmest of voices, declared words that echoed across time, words that would one day reach your ears in this moment. Do not be afraid. Indeed, my Lord is with me. He will guide me. In that instant, everything shifted. The sea that seemed like an end became an opening, the impossible became possible, and fear was shattered by faith. You may not be standing before an ocean with an army chasing you, but perhaps your life feels just like that right now. Bills piling up, deadlines closing in, relationships breaking, your heart crushed under the weight of uncertainty. You wake up each morning with anxiety gnawing at your chest, the fear of tomorrow suffocating you before the day has even begun. What if I lose my job? What if I can't pay the rent? What if my health collapses? What if I'm left alone? The questions haunt you like Pharaoh's army, relentless and unyielding, and the path ahead seems blocked by an ocean of impossibility. And maybe you've heard people tell you, time heals, or just stay positive. But deep down, you know those words are empty when fear keeps whispering in the darkness of your mind. So the question is, what will free you from this fear that controls your every breath? This verse will free you from fear. These words that Musa spoke are not just history. They are divine medicine for your soul today. When Musa said, "Indeed, my Lord is with me, he will guide me," he was declaring a truth that applies to every believer who surrenders to Allah. Allah's presence is not bound by time or place. Just as he split the sea for Musa, he can open paths in your life that you cannot even imagine. But here is the test. Will you trust him when everything looks impossible? Will you believe that his qadr, his divine decree, is not against you, but for you? This is the dividing line between those who live enslaved to fear and those who walk free in the light of tawakkul. Think about it. Fear of the unknown future is the greatest thief of peace. It steals your sleep, your focus, your ability to live in the present moment. How many nights have you tossed and turned, playing out scenarios in your head that never even happened? How many times have you felt paralyzed, unable to make a decision because of what might go wrong? But what if your fear was never meant to be your enemy? What if your fear is simply the test that Allah is using to guide you back to Him? Because when you are stripped of control, when you realize that no amount of planning or worrying can change what is already written, only then do you discover the true power of faith. And here lies the secret that most people don't understand. Fear itself can become the key that unlocks your trust in Allah. Musa could have panicked. He could have collapsed under the weight of despair like his people, but instead, he declared certainty in Allah's presence. His trust was not based on what he could see, because all he could see was a sea blocking his way and an army ready to slaughter them. His trust was based on what he knew of Allah, His mercy, His power, His promise. And that is exactly what you need to remind yourself of tonight. Do not look at the size of the waves. Do not look at the strength of the army chasing you. Do not measure your future by your own resources. Instead, measure it by Allah's promise. He has already told you, do not be afraid. So why do you still let fear control you? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself standing with Musa, the salty wind whipping against your face, your loved ones trembling behind you, and the army of your worries closing in. Can you feel that panic in your chest? And then you hear those words, "My Lord is with me. He will guide me." Suddenly, the waves part, and a path opens where there was none. Do you see it? That is your life. That is your struggle. Allah can create a path for you too. But the question is, will you trust Him enough to step forward? And let me ask you directly, Have you ever considered that your fear of the unknown is actually your lack of trust in Allah disguised as anxiety? This may be hard to hear, but it is the truth that will set you free. Many people think fear means they are weak, that their faith is not enough. But in reality, fear is an opportunity, an invitation from Allah to declare with your heart, "My Lord is with me." The people around Musa were believers too, but they let fear control their voices. Musa was also human, but he let faith speak louder than fear. Which one are you? If you feel these words piercing your heart, I want you to take a stand of faith in the comments. Write, "My Lord is with me, and I will not fear." Do not underestimate the power of declaring your trust in Allah. It is not just a comment. It is your way of breaking the chains that have kept you in silence. Some will hesitate. Some will be too afraid of what others think. But those who truly long for freedom will declare it boldly. So let your comment be your testimony, your act of surrender, your shield against the whispers of fear. And here comes the deeper truth. The sea only split when Musa stepped forward. The miracle did not come before he showed his trust. Likewise, your miracle may be waiting on the other side of your first step. Fear tells you to freeze. Faith tells you to move. Fear tells you to stay where it's safe. Faith tells you that Allah is your only safety. Which voice will you follow? Will you let fear of tomorrow dictate your life? Or will you let faith in Allah rewrite your story? Because here is something very few people realize. The future you are so terrified of is already known to Allah. He has written every detail, every turn, every outcome. Your worrying will not change it, but your trust can transform how you experience it. You can either walk into tomorrow shackled by fear, or you can walk into tomorrow with the confidence that the same Lord who split the sea for Musa is watching over your every step. Do you truly believe that Allah would abandon you? Or is it your fear whispering lies that you have chosen to believe? So tonight, let your heart rest. Whisper the words that Musa spoke. Let them sink deep into your soul. Do not be afraid. Indeed, my Lord is with me. He will guide me. This is not just history. This is not just a story for children. This is Allah speaking to you right now, reminding you that His presence is greater than your problems. And if you carry this verse with you, it will free you from the fear that has been holding you captive. But that is only the beginning, because there is another moment, another story in the Qur'an, where fear was so heavy that even the strongest heart could break. And yet, in that moment, Allah revealed a comfort so unexpected, so gentle, that it changed everything. Few people talk about it, but once you hear it, you will realize that the verse we just reflected on is only the first key. There is something even deeper waiting for you, and what comes next might challenge everything you thought you knew about fear, loneliness, and Allah's mercy. The cries of labor echoed in the silence of the desert, but no one was there to hear them. Miriam sat beneath a palm tree, her body trembling, her heart drowning in despair, and her soul feeling utterly abandoned. Imagine the weight of that moment. A young woman, pure and chosen by Allah, yet alone, holding the pain of childbirth without a hand to comfort her, without a voice to soothe her fears. The loneliness pressed on her like a mountain, so heavy that she cried out, wishing she could disappear from the face of the earth. That is the depth of her isolation, the kind of loneliness that makes you believe you cannot survive one more breath. And it is in that unbearable moment that Allah spoke, not with thunder, not with fire, but with the gentlest reassurance. Do not grieve. Your Lord has placed a stream beneath you. Surah Maryam 19:24. Words so tender that they melt despair itself. Words that cut through the silence to remind her she was never truly alone. And perhaps this is exactly how you feel today. Not in the desert, not under a palm tree, but in the middle of your own life, surrounded by people yet carrying an emptiness so deep that no one seems to notice. You may laugh in public, smile at friends, and show strength to your family. But when you lay your head on the pillow at night, tears soak into the silence and you wonder, does anyone really see me? Loneliness is one of the most silent fears. It doesn't always shout. It whispers. It whispers that you are forgotten, that no one cares, that no one will come to help. It convinces you that your pain is invisible, that your prayers go unanswered, that your heart is simply too small to matter in this vast universe. But the Qur'an tells you otherwise. The Qur'an reminds you of Maryam, abandoned by every human presence, yet embraced by divine mercy. And her story carries within it the same promise for you. Even when you feel unseen, Allah sees you. Even when you feel unheard, Allah hears you. This promise is what can free you from fear of abandonment. Think of the moment Maryam heard the voice calling out, "Do not grieve." Grief was flooding her chest like a storm, yet Allah calmed it not by removing the pain instantly, but by reminding her of His nearness. And then He provided in ways she could never have expected: a stream beneath her feet, dates falling from the tree to give her strength. Relief came from where she never imagined. And that is exactly how Allah operates in your life. Relief may not always come in the form you expect, but it always comes in the form you need. The real question is, do you trust Him enough to see the signs He is already sending you? Your loneliness is not a punishment, though Shaitan wants you to think so. It is not a sign that you are abandoned, though your heart may insist on it. It is often Allah's way of pulling you closer, stripping away the distractions so that you finally turn to the one who has always been there. Many people say, time heals. But time does not heal loneliness. Only the certainty that Allah is with you can. Time may numb the pain, but only His presence fills the emptiness. Maryam's pain was real, but Allah's response was more real. And your pain today is real, but Allah's mercy is greater. Close your eyes and imagine sitting under that palm tree with Maryam. You feel the contractions, the weight of the world pressing against you, and the crushing fear that no one will ever come. But then, imagine hearing that divine reassurance. Do not grieve. Can you feel the tears fall? Not just from pain, but from relief. That is what Allah is whispering to you right now. You are not abandoned. You are not forgotten. Your loneliness is the soil where faith grows deeper roots. If you have ever felt this way, if you have ever cried into the silence thinking no one heard, I want you to write in the comments, Allah is with me and I am never alone. Let this be your shield against loneliness, your declaration of trust. Many will watch this in silence, their fear convincing them that their isolation is too heavy to overcome. But you, if you are brave enough to type it, you are declaring to the world that Allah's presence is greater than your solitude. Do not hesitate. Write it. Prove to your own heart that you believe in His closeness. And here is something most people never realize. Some of the greatest souls chosen by Allah experienced the deepest loneliness. Maryam alone beneath the tree, Yusuf alone in the well, Musa alone in the desert, the Prophet Muhammad alone in the cave of Hira. If Allah allowed His most beloved to taste isolation, it was never to destroy them but to strengthen them. Loneliness is not evidence of rejection. It is proof that you are being prepared. And maybe your heartache is the very sign that Allah is preparing you too. Ask yourself, what if your loneliness is the exact place where Allah wants you to find Him? What if the silence that torments you is actually the space where His words can echo the loudest? You may not have noticed it, but in your most painful moments, didn't you pray with the most sincerity? Didn't your tears flow with the most honesty? Didn't your heart finally strip away the distractions and call out only to Him? That is the hidden gift inside the loneliness you hate. That is why Allah allowed Maryam to feel abandoned, so she could experience the sweetness of His reassurance. And that is why your loneliness is not wasted. It is sacred space for you to hear His voice. Loneliness is terrifying because it feels endless. You look ahead and cannot see who will come into your life, who will stay, who will hold your hand. But remember, even Maryam did not see the stream until Allah revealed it. Relief is often hidden just beneath your feet, closer than you imagine. Your eyes may not see it yet, but your trust must believe it is there. That trust is what separates despair from hope. That trust is what transforms loneliness into intimacy with Allah. So the next time you feel abandoned, remember this verse. Do not grieve. Your Lord has placed a stream beneath you. Let it echo in your chest like a heartbeat. Let it remind you that even when every person walks away, Allah remains. And if Allah remains, then you have never truly lost anything. And yet there is something even more striking. Maryam's loneliness was not just personal, it was public. She knew she would return to her people carrying a child, and their accusations would be merciless. Her solitude beneath the tree was only the beginning of the isolation she would face. But Allah comforted her before the storm, strengthening her heart so she could face what was coming. And maybe that is exactly what He is doing for you. Maybe your loneliness now is preparing you for the trials ahead, so that when the accusations come, when the betrayals strike, you will already know Allah is enough. Do you see how powerful this is? Loneliness is not the end. It is the preparation. It is Allah writing resilience into your soul. And if you carry this truth with you, it will free you from fear of being forgotten. Because how could you ever be forgotten by the one who created you, sustains you, and whispers to you in the silence? But this is only one face of fear. Loneliness cuts deep, but betrayal cuts deeper. What happens when those you trusted the most turn their backs on you? When the people closest to your heart become the very ones who wound it? There is another story in the Quran that reveals a truth most people ignore. A story that holds a verse so sharp it can slice through the pain of injustice itself. And when you hear it, you will realize that your suffering has never been meaningless. It has always been seen. And what comes next will challenge everything you thought about betrayal, patience, and Allah's justice. They pushed him into the darkness. Not strangers, not enemies, but his very own brothers. Imagine the sting of that betrayal. Yusuf, innocent and pure, cast into the bottom of a well by those who shared his blood, his laughter, his childhood. The night swallowed him, the cold water wrapped around his small frame, and the silence of abandonment pierced, deeper than any blade. Above him, the voices of those he trusted most faded into the distance as they walked away, leaving him to die. Betrayal cuts differently. It is not just pain, it is the collapse of trust, the shattering of bonds you thought were unbreakable. And Yusuf tasted that pain long before prison chains wrapped around his wrists, long before false accusations stained his name. Yet through it all, his heart clung to the one truth that could never be betrayed. Allah's justice never fails. And maybe you feel this wound too. Maybe the people you trusted most became the very ones who left scars on your heart. A friend you thought would defend you spread lies behind your back. A spouse who vowed loyalty broke their promises. A family member you sacrificed for repaid you with cruelty. Betrayal leaves you gasping because the knife is not in your back. It is in your chest, placed there by the ones you let closest. And worse than the pain itself is the question that follows. Why? Would Allah let this happen? The answer lies in Yusuf's story. He was not betrayed to be broken. He was betrayed to be raised. The well was not his grave. It was the beginning of a journey toward a throne. The Quran captures this truth with piercing clarity. So be patient. Indeed, the outcome belongs to the righteous. Surah Hud 11:49. Read those words again. Patience is not passive. Patience is not weakness. Patience is strength, a declaration that betrayal will not define you, that injustice will not dictate your future, that Allah is writing a story far greater than the cruelty of men. Yusuf's patience did not just keep him alive, it transformed betrayal into elevation. And your patience, if you cling to it, can do the same. But let us be honest, betrayal does not just hurt, it distorts your vision. It makes you see the world through cracked glass, mistrusting everyone, even those who wish you well. It makes you question your worth. Was I not good enough? Did I deserve this? It makes you doubt justice itself. Will those who wronged me ever be held accountable? And in those moments of torment, the whispers grow louder. Give up. Let bitterness consume you. Take revenge. But Yusuf did not give up. He did not drown in bitterness. He did not waste his life seeking revenge. He surrendered his heart to Allah, and that surrender freed him from the chains of fear and resentment. Ask yourself this: how many nights have you replayed the betrayal in your mind, imagining what you should have said, what you should have done? How many times have you let the injustice of others hold your peace hostage? And what has it given you? Except more sleepless nights and more restless days. The truth is that time does not heal betrayal. Only Allah's justice does. Only sabr, the patience rooted in certainty that Allah sees all, heals the wound. Because when you believe that Allah is al-adl, the most just, you stop wasting energy trying to balance the scales yourself. You trust that the scales are already in His hands. And if you have ever tasted betrayal, I want you to declare your trust in Allah in the comments. Write, Allah's justice is enough for me. Do not let silence be your response to betrayal. Speak faith into the wound. When others see your comment, it will remind them that they too can heal without revenge, that they too can find peace in Allah's justice. And if this message is touching your heart, then like this video as an act of sadaqah jariyah. Each like allows this reminder to travel to another soul who feels abandoned, betrayed, or broken. And share it too, because somewhere, someone is drowning in the same well of despair that Yusuf was thrown into, and your share might be the rope that pulls them back into the light. Here is a truth that may shock you. Sometimes Allah allows betrayal to remove people from your life who would have destroyed you if they stayed. Sometimes He lets injustice cut you down only to plant you deeper, so you can grow stronger. Yusuf was safer in the well with Allah than in his brother's company without him. And maybe you are safer alone with Allah than surrounded by those who pretend to love you, but secretly wish for your downfall. Have you considered that? Have you considered that Allah is protecting you by taking people away? The well was dark, but it was also a place of clarity. Yusuf learned in that pit that Allah was enough. He carried that certainty into prison and later into power. The betrayal that could have ruined him became the very foundation of his greatness. And the same can be true for you. Your pain today may be the seed of your elevation tomorrow, but only if you choose sabr over bitterness, tawakkul over revenge, and trust over despair. And let us not forget, betrayal is not just a wound, it is a mirror. It forces you to confront what you truly rely on. Do you rely on people to validate you? Or do you rely on Allah? Do you rely on relationships to sustain you? Or do you rely on the one who sustains the heavens and the earth? When people walk away, you discover if your heart was truly anchored in Allah or if it was anchored in them. And if it was anchored in them, betrayal is the mercy that drags you back to Him. So tonight, whisper these words into your heart. So be patient. Indeed, the outcome belongs to the righteous. Let it echo louder than the lies of those who betrayed you. Let it remind you that Allah's justice is never delayed, never blind, never unfair. And if you can hold on to this truth, it will free you from the fear of injustice, from the fear of never being vindicated. But let me take you even deeper, because betrayal hurts, but loss breaks differently. What happens when you do not just lose trust, but you lose everything? Your health, your family, your wealth, your peace. There is another story in the Qur'an, a story of a man who lost everything, yet still clung to Allah with tears in his eyes. And in that story lies a verse so raw, so filled with mercy, that once you hear it, you will never see suffering the same way again. Stay with me, because what comes next will shake your heart to its core and rebuild it with hope. The house that once echoed with laughter had fallen silent. The fields that once blossomed with life stood barren. The body that once stood strong was now bent with illness, wounds covering the skin, and pain echoing through every bone. This was the life of Ayub, a man who had once known abundance, family, and health, stripped of it all until nothing remained but his soul and his Lord. Picture him sitting alone, his wealth gone, his children taken, his body fragile, and even the people around him whispering that perhaps Allah had abandoned him. Loss had become his companion, grief his shadow, yet his lips still moved with remembrance. And in one of the most heartbreaking yet powerful prayers recorded in the Qur'an, he whispered, "Indeed, adversity has touched me, and you are the most merciful of the merciful. Surah Al-Anbiya 21:83. No accusations, no bitterness, only surrender. That is what it looks like to face unbearable loss with unshakable faith. And maybe your life feels shattered in the same way. Perhaps you have lost someone you loved so deeply that your heart still aches at the memory of their absence. Maybe you've lost health, waking up every day fighting a body that no longer feels like your own. Maybe you've lost wealth, drowning in debts and bills, wondering how you'll provide for those who depend on you. Or maybe you've lost yourself, that version of you that once had hope, that once smiled without forcing it. Loss comes in many forms, but its sting is always the same. The emptiness, the silence, the fear that life will never be whole again. And in that emptiness, Shaitan whispers the most dangerous lie, that you are broken beyond repair, that Allah has turned his face away from you. But Ayub's story destroys that lie. His losses were not a sign of Allah's abandonment. They were proof of Allah's trust in him. Allah knew his patience could carry him through storms most people would never survive. And maybe your pain is the same proof. Maybe the very fact that you are enduring so much means Allah has chosen you to walk a path where faith is refined, where sabr becomes your crown, and where tawakkul lifts you above despair. Do you see how this changes everything? Loss is not the end of your story. It is the soil where Allah plants your greatest strength. When people suffer loss, they often hear shallow words. Time heals all wounds. But time alone does not heal. Years can pass, and the grief can remain sharp as the day it first struck. What heals is remembrance. What heals is trust. What heals is whispering, like Ayub did. Indeed, adversity has touched me, and you are the most merciful of the merciful. This is not denial of the pain. It is the transformation of pain into worship. It is the moment where your tears become dua, where your sobs become dhikr, where your brokenness becomes your most powerful connection to Allah. Think of how profound this is. Ayub lost his health, his wealth, his children, yet he never lost his Lord, and that was enough. His tongue continued to remember Allah, and his heart refused to let grief sever the bond. How often do we complain when even a fraction of hardship touches us? A small setback, a minor illness, and we question why. But Ayub, stripped of everything, still praised Allah's mercy. What does that say about us? And what if Allah is showing us through his story that patience in loss is not weakness? It is the strongest proof of faith. If you have ever felt crushed by loss, I want you to write in the comments, "I trust Allah even in my losses." Let this be your public declaration that grief will not define you, that hopelessness will not consume you, and that your faith is stronger than the pain. Your comment might be the reminder another grieving soul needs to see. Today, do not hold it in. Declare it. Let your loss become a light for someone else. Loss feels like death, but sometimes it is birth. A birth of deeper faith, a birth of resilience you never knew you had, a birth of closeness to Allah that ease could never have given you. The truth is, comfort often distracts us, while pain awakens us. Ease can make us forget, but hardship makes us remember. Ayub's losses were not the end of him. They were the making of him. And perhaps your loss is not the breaking of you, it is the beginning of who Allah wants you to become. And here is the wow moment most people overlook. When Allah finally restored Ayub, he did not just give back what was lost. He doubled it. He gave him health, wealth, and family greater than before. What does this mean? It means no loss in this world is final. Allah can always replace, always restore, always give beyond measure. The key is sabr. The key is holding your tongue from despair and your heart from hopelessness. Can you imagine if Ayub had given up? Can you imagine if he had cursed his pain or turned away from Allah? He would have missed the miracle waiting for him. And maybe you too are standing at the edge of restoration, but Allah is waiting to see if your heart will hold on to him in the storm. So the next time you feel suffocated by loss, close your eyes and whisper like Ayub did. Indeed, adversity has touched me, and you are the most merciful of the merciful. Let those words remind you that Your grief is seen, your tears are counted, and your loss is not the end. Let them free you from the fear that you will never smile again, because Allah is capable of giving back joy even greater than what was taken. But loss is not the only fear that paralyzes us. Sometimes it is not about what we lose, but about what we lack. Sometimes the fear that eats us alive is not of absence, but of weakness. What happens when the challenge in front of you is too great, when the enemy is too strong, when you feel too small to fight? There is another story in the Qur'an, one that flips weakness into strength and reminds us that victory does not come from numbers, power, or might. It comes only from Allah. And when you hear it, you will realize that your weakness may be the very reason Allah will grant you victory. The battlefield looked uneven from the very beginning. On one side stood an army of men armored with shields, swords, and spears. Their voices thundered with confidence, their presence overwhelming to anyone who dared to face them. And at the center of their pride stood a giant, Goliath, a warrior so massive, so intimidating, that even the bravest hearts trembled at the mere sight of him. On the other side, the camp of Israel quivered with fear. Their eyes shifted from the giant to their own weakness, convinced that no one among them could possibly stand against such power. But in that moment of despair, when every soldier lowered his head, a young boy stepped forward. His hands were unarmed except for a sling, his body too small for armor, his voice steady with the kind of faith only a heart deeply anchored in Allah could carry. Dawood, still a youth, walked toward the battlefield not because he was the strongest, but because he trusted in the one whose strength dwarfs every giant. Can you imagine the whispers of those watching? They must have laughed. They must have thought, "This is madness. He will be crushed in a second." Fear filled the air, but Dawood's steps did not waver. He wasn't measuring himself against Goliath. He was measuring Goliath against Allah. And that shift changes everything. Where others saw a hopeless battle, he saw certainty. Where others trembled, he stood firm. His lips carried not words of self-reliance, but reliance on the Lord of the heavens and the earth. And with a single stone, guided by the decree of Allah, the giant fell. The sound of Goliath crashing to the ground was not just the end of one battle, it was the collapse of a belief that size, numbers, and weapons are what bring victory. The Qur'an seals this truth with timeless words. How many a small group has overcome a large group by Allah's permission? Surah Al-Baqarah 2:249. And here's the question that pierces deeper. How many times have you faced a giant in your life and convinced yourself you were too weak? Giants don't always come as men with weapons. Sometimes your giant is debt so heavy you feel crushed beneath it. Sometimes it's illness that drains your body and makes every step a struggle. Sometimes it's people who stand against you, mocking, criticizing, or oppressing you. And sometimes the greatest giant is inside, your doubts, your insecurities, your fear that you are not enough. Have you ever stood before such a giant and felt paralyzed? Have you told yourself, "I can't, I don't have what it takes"? That's the moment to remember Dawood, because weakness in front of the world is nothing if your heart is strong with Allah. This is the part that most people miss. Giants exist to reveal who you believe in. If you look only at yourself, you will always shrink. But if you look at Allah, every giant becomes small. Dawood's victory was not in the stone he threw, but in the faith he carried. And maybe your victory is not in the tools you think you lack, but in the certainty you place in Allah. Think of how many times we measure ourselves against challenges as though we are alone. I don't have the money. I don't have the health. I don't have the connections. I don't have the courage. But what if the question is not what you have, but who is with you? What if the very thing you call weakness is the reason Allah will raise you? Weakness humbles the soul, makes you lean on Him fully, and strips away arrogance. If victory came when we were strong, we might attribute it to ourselves. But when victory comes while we are weak, there is no doubt. It is Allah alone who raised us. If you have ever felt small before the giants in your life, write in the comments, "My weakness is my strength with Allah." Let it be a testimony that you no longer measure your worth by numbers, by status, or by resources, but by your connection to the Almighty. And as you write, realize you are declaring to yourself and to the world that giants will no longer paralyze you. Faith is bigger, Allah is greater, and He alone grants victory. There's another hidden truth in this story that should leave you speechless. Dawood's victory that day was not just the end of Goliath. It was the beginning of his rise as a leader, as a prophet, as a man whose name would be remembered for generations. The giant was not just an obstacle. It was the door to his destiny. Do you realize what this means for you? The very challenge you fear may be the door to the version of you that Allah has destined to rise. That illness, that debt, that heartbreak, that betrayal. It may be the battlefield where Allah writes your greatest victory. And here is where it becomes even more powerful. When Dawood struck down Goliath, it wasn't just him who was liberated. His entire people, who had been paralyzed by fear, were freed. Sometimes your courage is not just for you. Sometimes your trust in Allah becomes the reason others around you find strength. Perhaps your children are watching, your friends, your community, and when they see you stand firm in the face of your giant, their own fear begins to shrink. You are not fighting alone. Your strength in Allah ripples out to others who are silently fighting their own battles. So next time fear whispers to you that you are too weak, too small, too powerless, remember Dawood. Close your eyes and picture the giant collapsing. Feel the weight lift off your chest as you remind yourself how many a small group has overcome a large group by Allah's permission, and believe that Allah can turn your smallest effort, your weakest step, into the strike that topples your giant. But giants are not the only fear that enslave us. Even if we find courage against external enemies, there is another shadow that follows us everywhere, one that no weapon can fight, one that no escape can outrun. It is the fear of death, the most universal fear of all. And yet, the Qur'an does not leave us trembling in the dark. It speaks directly to this fear, offering words that not only calm the heart, but transform the way we see life and the hereafter. What comes next will shake the way you look at your own mortality and free you from the grip of fear that has haunted you. The grave is often imagined as the ultimate silence, the place where voices are muted and bodies rest in the earth. And yet for many hearts, the thought of death is not silence, but a storm. It is the shadow that follows you when you lie awake at night, the heaviness in your chest when you hear of someone else's passing, the question that creeps in, what will happen to me when it is my turn? Fear of death is not only about the moment of leaving this world, it is about the uncertainty of the unseen, what comes after the last breath, what awaits in the grave, and how one will stand before Allah. Every soul knows it cannot escape this moment, and yet so many try to push the thought away until it returns with more force. The Qur'an, however, does not leave us drowning in fear. It gives us a rope to hold, words that transform this terror into a source of strength, patience, and trust in Allah's decree. The believers in the time of the Prophet Muhammad faced trials not just of hunger or loss, but of life itself. Allah revealed words that were meant to pierce through that fear and replace it with conviction. We will certainly test you with a touch of fear and hunger and loss of wealth, lives, and fruits, but give good news to the patient, those who, when disaster strikes them, say, "Indeed we belong to Allah, and indeed to Him we return." Surah Al-Baqarah 2:155-156. These verses are not abstract theory. They are a shield, a reminder, a medicine for the soul that shakes at the thought of death. They transform the end of life from being an enemy to being a doorway, a return to the one who created you, loved you, and sustained you all along. Think about how often people try to escape the reality of death. Some drown themselves in distractions, others chase youth with endless attempts to hide their aging, while others avoid funerals, avoid the topic, avoid the reminder, believing avoidance will make the fear disappear. But the fear only grows in silence. The Qur'an, instead of telling us to escape the thought, tells us to face it with words of faith. When a believer says, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un," not only in times of death, but in every moment of loss, they are reshaping their view of existence. Life is not random. Loss is not meaningless. Every end is actually a return to Allah. And that return is not to avoid, but to His mercy. You might ask yourself, why should remembering death free me from fear rather than increase it? The answer is hidden in the wisdom of Allah. Fear grows from uncertainty, but Allah gives certainty. Fear grows from the thought of separation, but Allah reminds us it is only a return to Him. Fear grows from the illusion of control, but surrendering to Allah reminds us we were never in control to begin with. When you whisper those words, "Indeed, we belong to Allah, and indeed, to Him we return," you are no longer clinging to this world as though it is everything. You are holding on to Allah who is eternal. And here is the reframe that changes everything. Death is not the interruption of life. It is the continuation of the soul's journey. To fear it is natural, but to anchor that fear in Allah's promise is transformative. Imagine a traveler who knows their home is not in the desert they are crossing, but at the end of the road where their family awaits them. Every hardship of the journey becomes easier because the destination is certain. That is the believer's view of death. The grave is not the end, it is a passage. The hereafter is not a nightmare for the believer. It is the place where patience is rewarded and every tear shed in this life is compensated. Yet here comes the part that shakes many hearts. How often do people equate fear of death with weakness of faith? If you are scared, maybe you don't trust Allah enough. But is that really true? Or is it that fear itself is a sign of awareness, a reminder that pushes you toward preparation, repentance, and turning back to Allah before it is too late? Fear, when tied to Allah, is not weakness. It is the engine of transformation. The true weakness is ignoring death, living heedlessly, and assuming tomorrow is guaranteed. If you feel the weight of this reminder, write in the comments, "My return is to Allah." Declare it openly. Let your heart type it as an act of surrender, and as you do, reflect on what that truly means. This is not just about words, it is about breaking the chains of fear by declaring the truth of your existence. And if this reminder shook your heart, do not hesitate to press like and share this message so more hearts can be freed from this fear. Now pause for a moment. Close your eyes. Picture the last time you stood at a funeral. The sound of the Qur'an recited, the silence of the crowd, the soil being poured over the body. Remember the tightness in your chest. That moment was not meant to paralyze you. It was meant to awaken you. Allah allowed you to witness it, not to leave you terrified, but to remind you every soul is returning. The difference is how you prepare, and here is the mercy. Allah does not ask you to prepare with perfection, but with sincerity. Every prayer, every moment of patience, every time you whispered His name in hardship, every tear of repentance, all of it becomes your preparation. There is also a hidden gift in this verse. Allah does not simply say He will test with fear of death. He pairs it with hunger, loss of wealth, loss of lives, loss of fruits, because all of these are mini deaths before the final one. Losing money feels like the death of security. Losing health feels like the death of independence. Losing loved ones feels like the death of your world. Yet each time you respond with "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un," you are practicing for the final moment, training your heart to surrender until the last breath feels no different than all the little surrenders that came before. And do you see the beauty in Allah's wording? He does not leave the test as a warning. He says, "But give good news to the patient." Imagine that. Good news in the very moment of what feels like disaster. Because patience in the face of death is not resignation. It is trust. It is the soul whispering, "I was always yours, Allah, and I am returning to you." But death is not the only fear Allah addresses in the Qur'an. There are fears that grip us long before the final breath. There are nights when your dua feels unanswered, when your voice feels lost in silence, when you wonder if Allah has forgotten you. Yet the Quran holds another powerful reminder that reveals a truth many overlook. Allah never forgets, and every prayer is heard. What you are about to discover may transform not just the way you face silence, but the way you live every moment of your life. There is a silence that cuts deeper than noise, a silence that doesn't come from peace, but from the aching thought that your cries are unheard. Many people know what it feels like to raise their hand, whispering prayers into the night, only to feel as if those prayers dissolve into emptiness. You ask, you beg, you plead, and still the heavens remain quiet. This silence can feel heavier than any burden because it begins to plant a question in your chest. Has Allah forgotten me? And once that seed grows, it spreads into despair, into hopelessness, into the suffocating belief that maybe your dua is too small, too unworthy, or perhaps ignored. But the Quran does not leave us drowning in this fear. It confronts the lie that whispers into the heart, the lie that says you are forgotten. Look at the story of Prophet Zechariah. He was old, his hair gray, his body frail, and his wife barren. From a worldly perspective, the door of hope had closed long ago, and yet, with the full weight of impossibility pressing down on him, he still whispered a dua. He still lifted his voice to the one who can create from nothing, and Allah, in His mercy, responded. The Quran captures this moment beautifully. Your Lord says, "Call upon me, I will respond to you." Surah Ghafir 40:60. These are not just words for Zechariah, they are words for you, a guarantee that no dua is lost, no whisper ignored, no heart unseen. Think about this. Prophet Zechariah could have surrendered to despair. He could have said, "I am too old. It is impossible. Why should I even ask?" But the difference between silence that destroys and silence that strengthens is whether you let it push you away from Allah or closer to Him. His dua was not only answered with the gift of a child, Yahya, but with the eternal reminder that even when the world says no, Allah says yes, if He wills. How many times have you felt the weight of unanswered prayers? Maybe you asked for healing, and the illness stayed. Maybe you asked for relief, and the hardship continued. Maybe you asked for companionship, and loneliness lingered. And in that moment, the thought creeps in, has Allah abandoned me? But here is the truth. Allah's delay is not His neglect. His silence is not His absence. Every dua rises to Him, and every response comes in its perfect time, in its perfect form. Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it is not yet, and sometimes it is something better than you can imagine, but it is never nothing. This is where faith becomes transformative. To believe that your dua is heard even when you don't see the results yet is to place your trust in the unseen. It is to say, Allah knows what I cannot see. He is writing something I cannot understand right now. My job is not to control the outcome, but to keep asking. Because every dua is an act of worship. Every dua carves your closeness to Allah deeper. Even when the thing you ask for does not arrive, the relationship you build with Allah through dua is itself the greatest gift. And here comes the reframe that should shake you. The biggest tragedy is not unanswered prayers. It is prayers that are never made. Many hearts stop asking because they believe Allah won't respond. But the Quran challenges that despair directly. Call upon me, I will respond to you. It is not I might. It is not maybe. It is I will. The question is not whether Allah will answer, but whether you will keep asking. If you have ever felt like your prayers were unheard, write in the comments, Allah never forgets me. Let your words be more than a comment. Let them be an act of defiance against despair, a declaration that even in silence, your faith remains unshaken. When you write those words, you are reminding yourself of a truth that demolishes the lie of abandonment. Because if Allah could hear the whisper of Zechariah in the stillness of the night, after decades of hopelessness, then He can hear you. Your voice does not need to be loud. It does not need to be eloquent. It only needs to be sincere. Now pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. Imagine all the prayers you ever made that seemed to vanish. Imagine them as seeds planted in the soil of Allah's decree. Some of them sprouted quickly, giving you immediate relief. Some of them are still beneath the surface, growing roots unseen to your eyes, waiting for the season Allah has chosen. And some of them are reserved for a harvest in the hereafter, where you will stand before Him and see rewards beyond imagination, rewards that will make you say, "I wish none of my prayers were ever answered in this world, so I could find them all here." That is the certainty the Qur'an is calling you to hold. And this is why fear of being forgotten is one of the most dangerous fears. It blinds you to Allah's constant mercy. But the Qur'an cuts through the blindness with clarity. "Call upon me, I will respond to you." These words are an invitation, a command, a promise. They are Allah Himself telling you that you are never invisible to Him. But this is not all. There is another layer to this truth that is rarely spoken about. Sometimes the delay in response is itself the mercy. Imagine if every dua were answered instantly. Would you ever develop patience? Would you ever learn trust? Would you ever cling to Allah for His sake, or would you only cling to Him for the gifts He gives? The waiting purifies your intentions. The waiting deepens your connection. The waiting strips away the illusion that Allah is your servant and reminds you that you are His. And so, the fear that Allah has forgotten you is not only a lie, it is the very place where your faith is tested. Because to keep asking in silence is to declare, "I believe in you more than I believe in my circumstances." That is real tawakkul. That is the faith that transforms despair into peace. But silence is not the only fear that grips the heart. There is another pain that eats at many souls, the fear of failure. The thought that your efforts are worthless, your work insignificant, your life a series of defeats. Yet even here, the Qur'an has a verse that flips the narrative, showing that what you call failure may actually be success in the sight of Allah. What comes next will challenge everything you thought you knew about what it means to succeed. Failure has a way of carving scars into the heart, not the kind of scars people can see, but the ones you carry in silence. The ones that whisper to you in the middle of the night, "You are not enough." You try, you push, you pour yourself into goals, dreams, relationships, and then watch them collapse, leaving you to wonder if all your effort was meaningless. For many, the fear of failure is heavier than failure itself, because it convinces you that no matter what you do, the outcome will always betray you. And then you begin to shrink your life, to play small, to stop asking from Allah, to stop trying, because what's the point if it all ends in disappointment? That is the cage of fear that suffocates countless hearts. But the Qur'an doesn't leave you in that cage. It opens the door. It hands you the key. It reminds you that what you call failure is not always failure in the sight of Allah. Consider Prophet Nuh. 950 years he preached, tirelessly, patiently, day and night. He called his people in public and in private, with words of wisdom, with compassion, with the truth of revelation. And yet, what was his result? A handful of followers, almost a millennium of work, and still most of his people rejected him, mocked him, turned away. By the world's measure, this was failure. By society's standards, this was humiliation. But in the sight of Allah, Nuh's name is written in honor, his perseverance carved into the eternal record of faith. The Qur'an preserves his struggle not as an example of defeat, but as the pinnacle of patience and trust. And then comes the verse that carries the weight of comfort. So be patient. The promise of Allah is true. Surah Ar-Rum 30:60. Pause and let that sink in. If Allah Himself tells you His promise is true, then who has the authority to label you a failure? Society? Your family? Your own fearful thoughts? None of them. Because success in this world is measured by numbers, but success with Allah is measured by sincerity, by effort, by the purity of your intention. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of striving for His sake is recorded, even when the results you prayed for do not manifest. Think about your own life. How many times have you abandoned a dream, not because Allah closed the door, but because you feared the humiliation of falling? How many du'as have you left unsaid because you thought you were unworthy to even ask? And yet, Allah shows you through Nur that even when the results look small, your effort has infinite value with Him. That should break every chain of fear around your heart, because true failure is not falling short of your goals. True failure is surrendering your heart to despair. This is where the story disrupts the narrative we have been taught. People say, if you didn't achieve it, you failed. But the Quran says, if you were patient and sincere, you succeeded. Do you see the difference? Nuh's years of rejection were not wasted. They were transformed into elevation. Every refusal from his people was another brick in the palace of his honor with Allah. What if your so-called failures are also bricks, quietly building something in the unseen? And here's the part that stirs the soul. Many of us secretly believe that if we were truly beloved by Allah, things would always work out smoothly. But what if the opposite is true? What if the very struggles you see as setbacks are actually signs that Allah has chosen you to be purified, strengthened, prepared for something higher? The fear of failure is rooted in wanting the world to validate you, but the Quran reminds you that Allah's validation is all that matters. If this message speaks to the fear you've been carrying, write in the comments, "With Allah, I never fail." Let your words stand as a public rejection of the lie that your worth depends on results. Declare it, not for me, not for others, but for yourself, for your heart that needs to be reminded that Allah's promise is true. Breathe for a moment. Imagine Prophet Nuh standing alone after years of rejection, yet still calling his people with unwavering faith. Imagine how many times he could have stopped, how many times he could have said, "This is pointless," and yet he didn't. He kept walking, kept speaking, kept trusting. If he had measured success by numbers, his life would have been a tragedy. But because he measured success by faith, his life became a legacy. So what about you? Will you keep defining yourself by results you can't control? Or will you start defining yourself by the effort you can give, the sincerity you can bring, the trust you can place in Allah? The fear of failure will always whisper, but the Quran answers louder. So be patient. The promise of Allah is true. That is not just a reminder. It is a command, a guarantee, a lifeline. And yet, there is another kind of fear that strikes even deeper. Not the fear of failure, but the fear of being opposed, attacked, even hated for holding to your faith. The fear that when you stand firm in truth, the fire will be lit against you. But what if the very fire meant to destroy you could become the place of your peace? What happens next in the Quran will show you a scene so powerful it defies the laws of this world. There are few fears more paralyzing than the fear of enemies. The thought that others are plotting against you, criticizing you, undermining you, or even openly wishing for your downfall. It can keep you awake at night, your heart racing with the question, what if they succeed? What if their hatred destroys me? This fear grows especially heavy when you are standing for truth, when you are trying to live in obedience to Allah, but find yourself mocked, opposed, or isolated because of it. And in that fear, you begin to shrink. You hide your faith, you dim your light, you silence your convictions, all because you believe the fire of their hatred is too strong for you to withstand. But the Quran offers a story that turns this fear upside down, the story of Prophet Ibrahim, who was literally thrown into fire and yet found peace within it. Picture the scene. Ibrahim, alone against his entire people, had challenged the false idols they worshipped. He did not fear their anger. He did not compromise on the truth, even when it made him the most hated man among them. And when they could no longer tolerate his defiance, they made a decision: burn him alive. The fire they built was so great that it could not even be approached directly. It was said that he had to be catapulted into it. Imagine the terror of those flames, the crowd cheering for his destruction, the certainty in their eyes that this would be his end. And yet Allah's decree was greater. In the Quran, Allah reveals the command that changed everything. We said, "O fire, be coolness and peace upon Abraham." Surah Al-Anbiya 21:69. In that moment, The fire that should have destroyed him became his place of safety. The very force meant to annihilate him became the environment of his survival. This is not just a miracle of history, it is a message to you. When Allah is with you, no enemy can harm you unless He allows it. Think about what this means for your own life. How many fires have you been thrown into? Perhaps not of flames, but of betrayal, of slander, of rejection, of envy. How many times have people conspired against you, hoping to see you broken? And how many times did Allah quietly cool that fire, turning it into an experience that strengthened you instead of destroying you? The lesson is clear. The harm of others does not control your destiny. Allah does. Yet fear of enemies remains one of the most suffocating fears, because we imagine their words will define us, their actions will defeat us, their hatred will consume us. But what if I told you their fire can only burn as long as Allah permits it? What if I told you that every insult, every betrayal, every scheme against you is powerless without His command? This is why the story of Ibrahim matters. It's not about denying the reality of the fire. The fire was real, the flames were intense, the hatred was overwhelming, but Allah's word overpowered it all. And that is exactly what you need to remember when facing those who oppose you. If you have ever felt the sting of opposition, I want you to write in the comments, Allah is my protector. Let this not just be a comment, but a declaration. And if this message has reminded you of someone you love who is facing their own enemies, hit the like button and share this video with them, because your simple action could be the reason they remember that Allah can turn their fire into peace. Now pause and breathe. Imagine standing in the place of Ibrahim, the fire roaring before you, the crowd against you, the loneliness pressing down on your chest. Would you still stand firm? Or would you crumble under the weight of fear? Most of us would shake, maybe even give in. But Ibrahim shows us a higher path, that when you stand with Allah, you are never truly alone, no matter how many enemies surround you. This is not just courage. This is tawakkul, a level of trust that transforms the impossible into peace. And here is the disruptive truth. Many people think opposition is a sign that they are failing. But in reality, opposition is often a sign that you are on the right path. Ibrahim faced hatred not because he was wrong, but because he was uncompromisingly right. The fire was built for him because he stood for truth. So when people oppose you for holding to your faith, do not mistake it as abandonment by Allah. It might be His way of elevating you, of writing your story in the same ink as Ibrahim's. This changes everything about how we view our enemies. They are not the authors of our downfall. They are unwilling characters in the script Allah is writing for our rise. Their fire may be fierce, but His command is greater. Their plans may be sharp, but His protection is stronger. Their hatred may be loud, but His mercy is louder. So the next time you feel surrounded, remember Ibrahim. Remember that fire can be cooled, enemies can be silenced, and fear can be turned into peace. And ask yourself, are you focusing on the size of the fire or on the greatness of the one who commands it? That single shift in perspective is what frees you from fear. But this journey of confronting fear does not end here, because even if you defeat the fear of enemies, there is another fear that creeps into the hearts of so many believers. The fear that your sins, your mistakes, your past is too heavy to be forgiven. The fear that mercy has run out for you. Yet the Qur'an holds a verse that smashes despair, a verse that opens the door of hope no matter how dark your past has been. And once you hear it, you will never see your sins the same way again. There is a fear that cuts deeper than the fear of enemies, deeper even than the fear of death. It is the fear of despair, the quiet, suffocating belief that maybe you have gone too far, that your sins are too many, that your mistakes have piled so high they block the light of Allah's mercy from ever reaching you. This fear eats away at your heart, making you feel unworthy of dua, unworthy of forgiveness, unworthy even of hope. You look back at your past and whisper to yourself, maybe it's too late for me. This is not just sadness, it is despair, and it is one of the most dangerous tricks of Shaitan. Because if he cannot stop you from believing in Allah, He will try to make you believe that Allah has stopped believing in you. But Allah speaks directly to this fear in a verse so powerful that it has pulled countless hearts out of darkness. In Surah Az-Zumar, He says, "Say, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, do not despair of Allah's mercy. Indeed, Allah forgives all sins. Indeed, it is He who is the forgiving, the merciful." 39:53. Think about those words. He does not say some sins or small sins. He says all sins. He does not say perhaps or maybe. He says indeed, and He does not distance Himself from you. He calls you my servants, even while acknowledging your transgressions. This is not the voice of rejection. This is the voice of love calling you back home. Imagine, for a moment, that you are drowning in an ocean. You feel the weight pulling you under. You are gasping for air. You are convinced it is over. And suddenly, a hand reaches out to pull you up. That hand is this verse. It is Allah Himself saying to you, "Do not despair. I forgive all sins." It is the rope of hope in the middle of your storm. But the question is, will you grab it, or will you let Shaitan convince you to sink further? Despair is heavy because it makes you see yourself only through your failures. You remember the nights you did not pray, the promises you broke, the temptations you gave into, the words you should not have spoken, the people you hurt. You replay them again and again until they define you. And then you look at others who seem so pure, so strong, and you whisper, "Allah loves them. But me? I am beyond repair." But what if I told you that this very thought is a deception? What if I told you that believing Allah's mercy has run out is itself a lie Shaitan whispers to make you give up before you even begin? If your heart has ever felt heavy with regret, I want you to type in the comments, "I refuse to despair of Allah's mercy." Write it as a testimony, not just to me, but to yourself. Let it be the moment you publicly declare that you will not let Shaitan convince you that Allah has abandoned you. And as you do this, remember, every single time you turn back to Him, you are proving Shaitan wrong. Now reflect on something extraordinary. Some of the greatest people in our history committed mistakes too. Adam ate from the tree after being warned, yet he turned back to Allah and was forgiven. Musa accidentally killed a man, yet Allah chose him as a prophet. Yunus fled in frustration and ended up in the belly of the whale, yet when he repented, Allah delivered him and made his dua a rescue prayer for believers until the end of time. So who told you your sins are bigger than theirs? Who convinced you that Allah's door is closed to you? Here is the disruptive truth. Your sins do not disqualify you from Allah's mercy. They qualify you for it, because mercy is not for the perfect. Mercy is for the broken. Forgiveness is not for the flawless. It is for the flawed. And the verse in Surah Az-Zumar is Allah Himself declaring that no matter how far you have gone, you can always return. The application of this verse is not abstract, it is practical. The next time you hear that voice inside saying, "Don't bother praying, you are too dirty," silence it by remembering Allah's words, "Do not despair of my mercy." The next time guilt paralyzes you, make wudu, stand before Him, and speak to Him as you are. The next time you feel unworthy of dua, remind yourself, He commanded you to call upon Him, so your very desire to pray is proof that He has not shut you out. There is a secret here that few people talk about. Despair is not humility. Some think beating yourself down is a sign of modesty, but humility is returning to Allah despite your shame, not running away from Him because of it. Despair is arrogance disguised as sadness. It says, "My sins are greater than Allah's mercy." But true humility says, "My sins are many, but Allah's mercy is greater." Which one will you choose to believe? This verse frees you from fear because it dismantles the biggest chain holding you back, the belief that your past defines your future. With Allah, your past mistakes can become the very reason for your closeness to Him, if they lead you to sincere repentance. In fact, sometimes it is the sinner who cries to Allah with a broken heart that rises higher than the worshiper who never feels the weight of his flaws. So breathe deeply. Let these words wash over you. Do not despair of Allah's mercy. Hear them as if Allah is speaking them to you right now, because He is. Feel the chains of despair loosen. Feel the heaviness lift. And know that this is your invitation back to Him, no matter how far you have gone. And yet, here comes the final twist. Because even though despair tells you Allah's mercy has limits, the Qur'an reveals something else, that His mercy has no bounds, that even if your sins were to reach the sky, His forgiveness could erase them in an instant, that even if the world gave up on you, He never will, and that every tear you shed in repentance is not a sign of weakness, but a ticket to His love. So the real question is this: will you keep carrying despair, or will you drop it and walk into mercy? You have carried a heavy journey with me until this moment, walking through stories of prophets, verses of the Qur'an, and the hidden places of your own heart where fear lives. Fear of the unknown, fear of loneliness, fear of loss, of death, of failure, of despair. And yet every single time, Allah answered with hope. Every time He showed us through His prophets and His words that what terrifies us does not define us. His mercy does. The Qur'an is not a book of distant stories. It is a mirror, reflecting your own struggles and showing you that Allah has always been with those who tremble, those who cry, those who think they cannot go on. And if He was with them, He is with you. Now, before we close, I want you to take this moment seriously. This is not just the end of a video. This could be the beginning of your healing. Despair whispers that you are alone. But tonight, Allah has spoken to you through His book. Do not let this pass like just another piece of content. Let it become your turning point. I want you to prepare your heart. Take a deep breath. If you can, lift your hands. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable. Let the noise around you fade, and let us step into the presence of Allah together. This is not about me speaking. It is about you connecting. Feel your chest rise and fall. Let your heart soften. You are about to speak to the one who already knows your pain, your fears, and your unspoken prayers. Ya Allah, we come to you with broken hearts, with anxious souls, with fears that sometimes suffocate us. We ask you, Lord of the heavens and the earth, to remove from our chests the weight of fear and despair. Replace it with light, with sakina, with tranquility that only comes from you. Strengthen our sabr when life tests us. Grant us tawakkul when the future scares us, and remind us that you are always near. Ya Allah, forgive us for our sins past and present, the ones we admit and the ones we hide. Wrap us in your mercy and do not let us die except in a state that pleases you. Ya Allah, free us from fear, fill us with hope, and grant our hearts peace. If you whispered Ameen, know this: Allah heard you. If you reached this point, it is not coincidence. It is proof that Allah is already working in your heart, already answering your dua, already guiding you to Him. And now, I leave you with a final reminder. Your journey is not over. In fact, it has just begun. Escreva nos comentários: confio em Allah, como seu ato público de fé. Compartilhe este vídeo com alguém que está sofrendo, porque talvez a sua simples ação seja a razão pela qual outro coração encontre esperança hoje. Inscreva-se neste canal para caminhar conosco, porque aqui você nunca estará sozinho. Sempre haverá uma palavra do Qur'an para curar, uma lembrança para fortalecer sua fé e uma comunidade para sustentar você. And do not leave yet. The next video on your screen is not random. It is the continuation of this journey, the answer to prayers you may not even know how to put into words. If this message touched you, what you will discover in that video could change your life even more. Do not let Shaitan convince you to stop here. Step into the next reminder, because it might be exactly what you have been asking Allah for. Indeed, with hardship comes ease. Surah Ash-Shar 94:6. So breathe deeply, hold on to hope, and walk forward with the Qur'an as your guide.